We've reached the 10 o'clock hour. It is Tuesday, August 8th. The Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte and the governing body of all other special assessment and taxing districts for which said board so acts is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at that assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. Kylie, will you call the roll, please?
Supervisor Borges?
Here.
Supervisor Wilson?
Here.
Supervisor Starkey?
Here.
Chair Short?
I am here.
And I'll take note that Supervisor Howard is absent.
Thank you very much. If you would all join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. Now, if you would all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Lopez, do we have any introduction of new employees this morning?
Yes, Chair and Board, we do. I actually don't see a couple of them, so they haven't made it down here yet. So if they do arrive, we'll take care of that then. But I have Miss Antoinette Self, who's going to introduce a new recreation employee.
Very good.
Good morning, Board.
Good morning.
I am pleased to introduce you to our newly hired Recreation Program Coordinator, John Horner.
Morning, John.
I wrote a little something here because I always get nervous standing up here in front of you guys. Good morning, Board of Super. It's not like being on the radio, so it's a little different. I'm honored to stand before you today as a new recreation coordinator. My love and passion for recreation and sport in this community is bar none. In the past 6 years, I've gone back to school and learned more about social and behavioral science to help me better understand and connect with the young children and adults in the community on an emotional and a behavioral level. I believe there's a significant correlation one's physical health with their mental health, and I'm hoping to bridge that gap through our amazing youth recreation programs. Also, I understand the value to provide services that link all the fantastic nonprofit organizations to each other and give them the help and foundation to succeed with their programs. I also feel that our adult population in the community and all over the country has been hit hard in the last 5 years with the pandemic. Adult sports and recreation needs to get back to being celebrated and making it a fun outlet socially, emotionally, and with your friends and families and coworkers that need a place to unwind after work and get some physical activity. It's a goal of mine to get out and promote our adult programs and do my best. With the support from this board, I believe we can reach out to our goal and mission to become more proactive rather than reactive to build a healthier community. Last but not least, I would like to thank you, the board, for the support in allowing me to serve the community in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Welcome.
Hey, John, I'd just like to say I've watched your dedication and stuff to the youth and the high school sports, and I really appreciate it. I've been there, watched side by side with you, and really glad you're here.
Yeah, I think it's just full circle. I think I got another 20 years to provide this kind of services to the community when it comes to recreation. I've learned about emotional IQ and stuff from Cheyenne and everybody from DHHS. It's been an awesome family situation. So
Looking forward to seeing what you can do.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it, John. And again, I know we went through quite a loss reduction after the pandemic, especially, and so I know it's an enormous rebuilding process, and I look forward to seeing that. And I know that your passion for the sports and the kids and bringing it back into will help a long way to make that a reality again. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, Chair. Thank you. Yep, we did have some people join us here in the audience. I'm not sure if Whitney Pinkham is going to introduce the employees or if Maria Fuentes is. Okay. Looks like Maria Fuentes will be introducing a couple of new of our HR employees.
Very good. I was wondering if they were the ones who walked in. Appreciate that.
I'm just here for support.
Hi, my name is Maria, and I'm the Human Resources Analyst. And so as you may know, our HR department was seeking for 2 human resources technicians. We are happy to mention that we have filled both vacancies. And as of last month, both Janelle Poland and Amber O'Laughlin have joined our department as the new HR techs. It's an exciting time to be a part of the growth of our team, and we can confidently confirm they are bringing in their unique skills and motivation to learn our work in this field. So please join me in offering Janelle and Amber a warm welcome.
Thank you, and welcome.
I'm Amber O'Laughlin. I've actually been employed with the county for going on 4 years now. I was previously in another department, Department of Child Support Services. I'm excited to start in human resources. There's a lot to learn, so be patient with me, but I'm excited and I thank you for the opportunity.
Very good, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janelle. It's nice to meet all of you, and I'm just happy to be part of this team.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chanel. Thanks for being here this morning. Appreciate seeing you.
Chair, we also have one from Health and Human Services today.
Very good.
Good morning, Board. Jake Campbell,
Morning,
Public
Jake.
Health Nutrition Program Manager. I'd like to introduce Penny Kramer, our newest office technician for the WIC program in Public Health.
Hi,
Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I've been with the county almost 8 years, and I had come from juvenile hall, and now I'm over with WIC, and there's so much to learn. I didn't realize WIC offered as much as it does, but I'm excited. I'm excited to do this.
Very good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Okay. With that, we'll move on to, do we have anything to report out of closed session?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, at this time, the chair requests any deletions, corrections, or additions from board members to the agenda at this time. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must have come to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Is there any such items? Okay, seeing none, we'll receive other brief reports or announcements from the board members at this time. Supervisor Starkey, you want to kick us off?
I always do.
Thank you very much.
So since our last meeting, I have attended quite a few meetings. But the most important, not the most important thing, I always hate when people say that, but one very important thing was I hosted a luncheon that brought people together that are providing services for our elderly population. We had people there from hospice, from adult protective services, behavioral health, the senior center, Addie Meadham. There was 20 to 25 different agencies who attended that we all got together to share an opportunity to what we're doing in the community, what services are being provided, how we can work together. I made a few love connections. The GOAL program, which is the Greater Outdoor Adventure Team, is going to now host field trips specific for Addie Meadham or the Senior Center. So it was just like this really great opportunity for all of us to get together and share what's going on. We often work in silos. We don't really know what's happening until we need to know what's happening, until one of our parents is elderly and we have to get out there and see what's available. So this was just a really great opportunity. One of the most exciting things that came from that is, and I just had learned about it, was that Redwood Coast Transit Authority, they're now offering service, transportation to Grants Pass and Medford 2 days a week. So, so for medical appointments. So it's not just for elderly people, it's for anyone that needs that transportation to Grants Pass or Medford. They're coordinating with the doctors over there so that we can get the appointments at those certain times so we can get people over there and back. That was just wonderful to know about and hear about. It was a theme this last 2 weeks. I did also attend a hearing about California's master plan for aging and what's happening statewide with regard to how we're responding to our aging population. One person on the board might be a boomer, but we have to really kind of look at that increasing population of boomers in our community and how we're going to respond as a society to those services as they age and need those. So it's something I'm very interested in. I also worked with Area 1 Agency on a project where we are incorporating tribes and to see what the tribes might need and how we can partner and work together, because at the end of the day, we are all one community, and it's how we're going to respond as a community to help each other. I attended the Redwood Rise monthly meeting. That is part of the SURF program. I volunteered myself to be part of the equity committee so that I can make sure that Del Norte County is not getting left behind. This SURF is with 4 counties, the regional approach. So it's Mendocino, Humboldt, Lake County, and Del Norte County, and I want to make sure that Del Norte County gets their fair share. So I think it's a perfect fit for me to be on the equity committee. I attended the health fair at Beachfront Park, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Anna Porter. She, from my understanding, she is a public health employee. She spearheaded this entire event, and it was just a remarkable showing. Again, similar to what we did with the luncheon, but to have in one spot, one place where everybody could get together to see what everybody else is doing, to share resources and services, and also just highlight that we live in a really great community. So I just want to give her a huge shout out for that undertaking. I attended the local transportation committee for Supervisor Howard. I briefly went to the National Night Out, which is sponsored by Crescent City PD, to just get law enforcement and the community together in a non-urgent situation, which was wonderful. I attended the local behavioral health board meeting, and what I'm pleased to know is that Cheyenne Hogan with the behavioral health project manager will be here today, along with 2 other employees that are going to present more about this branch, which I'm happy to hear. There's a couple things that they're going to highlight, so I'm not going to talk about it, but I want to just say that we really need to start paying close attention to the modernization plan for the MHSA funding. She will be highlighting that later, but as a board, we really need to pay close attention to that. And finally, I attended several discussions regarding the dispatch and animal services with city staff and their councilmen. We are working to find a real equitable solution to the services, the fine services, I will say, that the Del Norte Sheriff's Department provides to this community through dispatch and animal services. So Supervisor Short and I are on that committee, and we are working toward making sure that our services that are being provided are being paid for in an equitable amount. So that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey. Supervisor Wilson, did you have anything?
Again, I attended the tri-agency after our board meeting last week, or 2 weeks ago. Also attended several meetings with members of the fire district in Klamath, trying to find resolutions to issues that are ongoing and we're dealing with down in the Klamath area. Talked to several members active and inactive or retired from that service down there, and to get an overview of the problems they're facing in the Klamath area. We also had attended the behavioral board meeting to see what's happening with the mental health issues and what's coming out of Sacramento dealing with mental health, as that service is being pushed back down to the local level, and what resources we have available and what services are going to be mandated that be provided here locally. It's going to be a challenge because, like most things coming from the state, you have the requirements, but we do not have the services and the resources necessary to fully meet the requirements that the state is mandating, given the resources, the dollars that they are providing. And so, as always, one size does not fit all, but however, we are still aggregated to mandate these programs going forward, and what it's going to mean to us as we move forward to see that these things can be fulfilled. I've had numerous meetings with local fire chiefs and districts on several issues dealing with road access and accessibility, as well as seeing if we can pursue pilot projects on fuel reduction to mitigate fire dangers in our areas, sense, what has been transpiring locally is our local fire departments are responding to numerous warming fires and fire responses to areas immediately around our communities because they are the inhabitants of homeless parks or homeless encampments, and they're responding to as many as 3 or 4 a week of these fires getting out of control. And so if we can utilize that fuel reduction as well as utilize that dollars to clean up some of these high-risk areas in and around our communities, that will greatly reduce our risk. Also looking towards conversations with Coastal Conservancy on looking at possible ways that we can improve and develop the South Beach area. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Okay, we're going to move on to our consent agenda at this time. Do we have any public comment on our consent agenda?
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you, Board of Supervisors. Yes, I'm here today again to express my belief that this board is promoting a social service sanctuary. Whether it's mandated by the state or through you guys, I'm not sure, but do you have any idea how much you're approving financially in today's consent agenda? Over a few million? Maybe over 5 million? Over 7 million probably? You know, it's hard to tell for line item number 7 how much that one really costs, but $42,000 for number 4, $30,000 for 8, $550,000 for 9, $2,856,000 for number 10, $69,000 for number 11, $3,167,660 for number 12. So over $7 million you're approving with this vote. How many workers do we have in this county? I asked a couple weeks ago, didn't get a response, but I guess 12,000. Is that close? Probably high, huh? No one knows? You don't know how many workers we have in our county. That's a lot that you're approving, and it's getting thrown on the backs of taxpayers. $7 million. We need to show some accountability and some financial responsibility and just approve what we can pay for. You know, the state, where are we getting this money? You know, it's just a zero on a computer. But are we getting it? Are we seeing positive outcomes from the things that we're promoting? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if I need to take pictures and bring them in to show you guys. I mean, are the transients rampant around downtown? Do I need to take pictures of the numerous local businesses that are shuttered and locked up? Can you guys not see it? What's going to change? I hope you can not approve something on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board at this time.
I'd like to pull 7 and 10 for discussion, please.
Okay, pulling 7 and 10, so a motion for the remaining items would be appropriate at this time.
I'll move to approve the remaining items.
I'll second that.
Thank you. You got a motion and a second to approve all items minus items 7 and 10. Kylie, would you pull the vote,
Just to
please?
clarify, Supervisor Wilson, are you wanting to pull them for a separate vote, or are you want to just discuss?
Discuss.
Okay.
Well, okay, if we're going to bring it out and discuss them and invite public comment on those, then it'll require a separate vote. Is that what you're looking for? Or did you just want to make a comment on it?
I need a separate vote as much as I wanted to bring these up for discussion, because I really wanted to hear from DHS as I discuss this for now to bring these forward, since, again, both of these are critical to the operations of DHSS going forward, especially the number 7, but also to hear exactly what's being provided for the $2.8 million in this drug Medi-Cal program. Because again, it's something that's
Okay, so just
it's going to be a benefit to the community.
just noting that we have a motion and a second for the remaining items. Go ahead and start your discussion on item 7 to begin with, and we'll let Joel kind of guide us on whether we need to do a separate vote after that discussion.
If I can call Renell. And my curiosity is, again, this is something that's been long discussed, something that the board has recognized has been needed in a reorganization so that the DHSS could operate in a much more effective and not official, but efficient way. Yeah. So if you can just comment to what your time frame and what your hopes and expectations are with these fulfillments of these positions.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Renelle Brown, Director of Department of Health and Human Services. As you mentioned, this has been a long process, probably over a year. We've brought information forward about restructuring for the department and landed on the most recent approval of adding 3 deputy directors with a reclassification of the assistant director position to a deputy director. At that time, we discussed the costs. This item really was just to approve the job descriptions. That's why there isn't any information about cost, because that was on a prior item. But really what we're looking at, time frame, as soon as the job descriptions are approved, we'll start the recruitments in hopes that they'll be filled as quickly as possible. As we know, recruitments can take some time. Each of the job descriptions really outlines some specific programs and requirements for those positions. Overall, these positions will help with the strategic planning as well as thinking for each branch. I mean, right now, I do all of that, and it's too much. And especially with all the new initiatives that the state has brought down, particularly in behavioral health, but actually in all of our branches. In social services, we have wraparound reform. We're talking about the master plan on aging, as well as for public assistance. We've had the public health emergency unwinding, where there's been a lot of changes there, and with staffing capacity. So these roles will really help frame and align the department structure to be more integrated and have some more stability at those leadership levels, so the program managers can work on program. Right now, the program managers are doing both. I'm doing all of the above, and these positions are really help with that structure. As you know, we're the largest department, so I appreciate your support in expanding that structure to have a more balanced supervisory of the department.
And again, I really am happy to see this go forward, because it's been desperately needed for a long time, and now, again, like all things, this falls back on you, because it's hiring the right people to fill
Correct.
those key roles that not only make your job doable, because so much has been put on your shoulders that was well above and beyond, and with it being the largest department that we do have, and with varied responsibilities from public health to social service, it's going to be a blessing once you get these things filled, and I look forward to hearing and seeing those directors as they come forward.
Thank you. And one more thing I'd like to add is, in that process of developing the job descriptions, there really was an effort to help with succession planning, to provide for some stability at that level, so when I retire, it'll be much more stable in the transition.
Well, very good. I think that was just an explanation of the board action. Joel, you probably don't need to bring that up for a separate vote?
Yeah, I don't think so. You can always discuss the things on consent. It's not a problem to not do it.
Okay.
And then if you would please describe what number 10 is going to fulfill, and what it's going to meet towards the requirements, what it's going to provide to our community.
Sure, yeah, and this is an ongoing state contract that we do, multi-year contract for our drug Medi-Cal services, so we're required to provide some services The amount increased, as you can see, and that's usually based on our Medi-Cal users. So each time they reevaluate how many users are using services within our community, and then our allocation or amount for our contract increases. Some of the services that we provide are screening and assessments, level of care determinations, using the ASAM criteria. We provide outpatient services and treatment, intensive outpatient treatment, perinatal residential treatment, narcotic treatment programs. Some of those were examples on other contracts that were on the consent agenda to provide those services. As you know, we don't have any in-county providers, and so we have to go out of county to have those contracts in place to provide those required services. This really goes in line with the Nexus to the Community Reacher Rural project that we're working on to try and get some of those services within the county. But for now, this allows us to do some Medi-Cal billing to get reimbursement for those services.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Renell. Appreciate that.
So I can modify my motion to include the entire consent calendar.
Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
Okay, Kylie, would you pull the vote, please?
Is there a place where the public can participate in the discussion?
There was just an update on those, not an update, but an explanation. It's just an explanation of those two items?
Described as an explanation. I heard it described as a discussion.
Well, there really wasn't much of a discussion. She just explained those items.
Described as a discussion.
There's no legally meaningful distinction between a discussion or a explanation. The consent is a single item, and public comment was offered, and we're ready to move on.
Thank you very much. Kylie, would you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, now it is time for our 10:25 timed comment, item, which is the public comment period. Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Do we have any general public comments at this time?
Yes, since the first of the year, this board has paraded just a whole host of new employees. Many of them are in executive positions, and there's this tried and true statement that a good leader has the ability to delegate his or her workload to people that might be able to relieve some of that load off of her, rather than hire 4 new assistant directors to relieve her of that load. I find that the board is somewhat significantly lacking in the ability to represent the constituents of this community, particularly in the fact that recently, on the 25th of last month, 5 members of this board sat in a public meeting that they asked for, a special public meeting in which they wished to have the public respond to the concept of reinitiating the tri-agency. The public showed up in more than significant numbers, considering that the board typically has anywhere from less than a half a dozen to, in some cases, on special occasions, maybe a dozen people show up to express their opinion. That board heard 30 people from the community tell them that they did not wish that the tri-agency be reactivated. 3 of the members of this board, one who is absent, decided not to pay attention and be a representative of this community and vote to reestablish the tri-agency. And I find that an appalling lack of the idea that you are to represent your constituents, not what you think you can do some good for this community. You are up here because people elected you to represent them, not determine the outcome for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other general public comment?
Yes, there's too much to say in 3 minutes, but I'm a whistleblower.
It's upside down, hon.
Oh, thank you. Well, I want to go this way. I'm a whistleblower who's being retaliated against. Thank you for mentioning my little sister. She's being scared and threatened into not talking to me or helping me. What is being done to me by the FBI long before lights is I'm a targeted individual of the Counterintelligence Surveillance Program. It's an illegal torture program, and for the first time in 50 years, I'm somebody who can prove that this exists. 20 police at Roseville PD approximately should be arrested and in jail. I have the identities of COINTELPRO coordinated gang stalkers. They are domestic terrorists, torturers, who select a targeted individual who can prove things that Placer County is not an egalitarian society, as I found out neither is Del Norte. I have men coming up to me thinking they could throw things on me. Fluid getting thrown in my face. Women suffer acid attacks all over the world. My life has been systematically destroyed because of what I can prove. Instead of people worrying about why I shine lights, they should ask, why did I do that? Really, why did I do that? Because I was being tortured and terrorized by police and the FBI. COINTELPRO operatives terrorize an individual and systematically destroy their life, hack all their tech. What is being done to me is being done with weaponized brain-to-computer interface nanobiotech that's being used to conduct brain experimentation, sexual, biological, psychological, and social. And society is being refined to participate in a sadistic psychological warfare program. Many members in your community are being bribed and paid. Richard Griffin threatened me at the last council meeting without cause because I want to ask Ray Altman why he let false narratives propagate regarding his psychotic sister, Sarah Melson, Robin Robles, and Michael James Alberici. I can expose hundreds of people, hundreds of crimes. This is sadistic, what is happening to me. People are being told to lie to me and tell me they haven't heard anything. Janet Altman was bribed. I can prove it. My brother Steve Riley was bribed. My nephew. There is no amount of money they won't pay, no threat. I can obliterate every false narrative about me, and your school district has participated in catastrophic personal brain injury and a psychological warfare tactic called vehicle mapping to propagate heinous false narratives against me. I've never acted the victim, never once. I have been the victim, but everything important to me is being reversed. This is brain experimentation that's comparable to the Nazi experimentation that happened during World War II and every genocide. I challenge the FBI, any federal intel agency, any police agency to have BCI nanobiotech used on them so we could see that these heinous narratives regarding me were intended.
Ma'am, your time has expired, so if you'd wrap it up,
I don't think genocide, 3 minutes is enough. And the fact that your police and FBI are sex trafficking me, these are the men who are paying people and telling people to lie about me, that chain up little girls and put them in dungeons, and the U.S. State Department sends them home. So how does a person get more than 3 minutes to talk about COINTELPRO torture tactics? Because I can write an FBI torture report myself, like Daniel J. Jones's CIA torture report. How does someone get more than 3 minutes to talk about the heinous hundreds of crimes that have been committed against them?
3 minutes is our public comment period, ma'am. I don't know how you would do that.
You have to be considered an expert by the county.
Oh. I'm an expert on COINTELPRO torture because I've been the recipient of it for over 2 years now, as I've been lied about.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comment. Is there any other general public comment?
Good morning again, and thank you. Disappointing to hear those remarks, but if she came here looking to resolve something with action, she came to the wrong place. We have witnessed this board's inability to produce positive influence in our community, and it's disheartening. Good people are leaving our community, and we're attracting more social services. So the tri-agency was disappointing as well. You guys approved that. You know, it's been in existence for over 50 years and been mainly a failure during that time. It's unfortunate that you feel like you have to go to another agency to get anything accomplished, and why you can't find within yourselves and within this board to produce something actionable. It's really disheartening. And then on to the consent, you know, it'd be interesting to know, and I'd like to make a request for public information on what the total budget is for DHHS. You know, she has several departments. Just like to know what we're spending in totality on our sanctuary county. And it seems like there's a little inconsistency with the consent where you ask the public to respond first. Why are we not asking board members to comment first and then for the public? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more general public comment? Okay, I'll close the public comment period at this time. Move on to item number 14, which is a 10:30 timed item to conduct a public hearing to provide the community with an opportunity to become acquainted with and the ability to provide comment on the proposed Delaware County Jail Rehabilitation Project as requested by Mr. Hooper. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's very exciting to be before the board this morning speaking about a project that we think is going to be a really positive thing, long overdue, honestly, in a lot of ways. We have discussed the project previously. The concept of the project has been discussed really since the federal appropriation was made by Senator Feinstein. The time that it's taken to really put the project together is really kind of a function of what it takes to put together a project where there's federal funding involved. So while it was great that the federal funding was appropriated, you know, then the work actually has to begin. So we've been engaged really in the effort of that work since the time the fiscal year 22 appropriation was announced. But again, we're very excited to have a project to present to the board and to the community today. So, you know, it was mentioned earlier by Supervisor Starkey, collaboration, and this has been a highly collaborative, inclusive process. We've had stakeholder meetings with all the affected stakeholders, obviously the sheriff and his staff, the jail captain, county council, building maintenance, IT, of course, administration with our project manager, Lenders Construction out of Eureka, and our contracted architects, Nichols, Milberg, and Rosetta out of Reading. You know, we've had, you know, again, those roundtable discussions in terms of really prioritizing what the efforts of the project need to be focused on in order to get the best public benefit with the limited funding that's available through the appropriation. Again, $3.1 million is great. Sounds like a lot of money, but when you actually start putting together a project, you find you're not going to get nearly as far as you need to. So we're going to get into a little bit of that today. And of course, this is an opportunity for, you know, the public to be aware of these efforts, to be hopefully engaged. We did announce that we were going to be having this presentation back in July whenever the grant authorization was provided from the board. Here we are today. We scheduled a public hearing. Of course, we did all the noticing in the newspaper, but as was pointed out by one of the previous speakers, public engagement sometimes can be hard to get. We really do hope we can get that here today with this presentation. So again, we received a federal award. This was part of the fiscal year 22 omnibus federal spending bill. Senator Feinstein really spearheaded the funding for the community. We're very appreciative of that. In order to actually disperse the funding, what Congress did is they don't obviously just write you a check. They need to send it through a federal agency. So in this case, it was sent through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Interestingly, the Rural Development Program has a community facilities program, which is how this funding is going to be dispersed. So as I indicated, since the time the federal award, the appropriation was announced, we've really been trying to put these pieces together through a collaborative effort. Really the biggest partner, I think, in that has been the state Board of Community Corrections, BSCC, Board, California Board, whatever, Community Corrections. Under the BSCC regulations, Title 24 is the statute that specifies the standards for local detention facilities. So, I guess the best way to put it for the purposes of the public presentation is we all had kind of a vague awareness that the jail has issues. Perhaps Supervisor Wilson, knows the issues more acutely than the rest of us. But, despite the vague awareness, it was really a question of what specificity could we apply to the thinking to really, nail down what those issues were. So through consultation with representatives from the BSCC, again, as part of kind of the inclusive process, not just operating in silos, we actually had a representative from Sacramento come up, do a couple different jail tours with us, in addition to the inspections that they normally do on a biannual basis. So we had the findings of the inspection, we had the findings of the consultation that we had conducted with the BSCC representative, and we put out a request for proposal. The RFP was really, with the idea that we'd be able to get hooked up with a professional in the industry that works on jail design maintenance that could really guide us in our thinking for how we could approach the project. Unfortunately, the RFP was unsuccessful. That was posted in April of 2022. We didn't receive any responses to the RFP, which again was pretty disappointing, but not totally unexpected, because it was, again, calling for a pretty high degree of specificity and knowledge, and the people that kind of operate in that area are pretty limited. But again, through the efforts with the BSCC, we were able to get, again, kind of an extension of the inspections that they would typically do in the form of technical assistance. And this is what I mentioned a moment ago, having the representative from the BSCC actually come to the county, tour the jail, and provide us technical assistance on, in their mind and in their expertise, what were going to be those highest priority, those most crucial issues for us to deal with. So in June of 2022, we did that. Conducted the tour of the facility, took obvious copious notes of all the findings within the facility. We went through the entire facility, top to bottom. Came up with a pretty good list of items that we need to get dealt with. Although it was a bit of a mess, because it was this is everything that we need to address, and how do you strategically approach that? So at the conclusion of the technical assistance process, having kind of gathered all that pretty overwhelming information, again, that's where the strategy comes in. How do you actually approach this in a cost-effective way that's going to get us our biggest bang for the buck, essentially? So because we had posted a competitive RFP for services, professional services, and were unsuccessful, we're bound as a public agency under a procurement statute to have a competitive open process. And because we were unsuccessful with that, then we could kind of revert to a sole source procurement process. So through the consultations with the BSCC, we were kind of directed to maybe go talk to these architects out of Reading. NMR is what I'm going to refer to them here in the presentation, Nichols, Melberg, Rosetto Architects and Engineers, because they do have the expertise that the BSCC felt like could be helpful in our process. So we didn't have any response to the RFP, but we were able to put together a contract, which this award authorized for services from NMR. And basically what NMR was able to do, again, based on their expertise as licensed engineers and architects, and really jail experts, was to take that wealth of information that we were able to put together from the technical assistance with BSCC and be strategic, focus our efforts and our energies and our resources into the things that were going to be the highest priorities. So through that, and I apologize, this is going to be kind of hard to see for the folks in the audience today. Hopefully folks can see it on their computers at home, and hopefully the board can see it. And this was included as part of the board package, so if anyone's interested, they could pull the board package off of the agenda system online and kind of drill into this in a little more specificity. But really what NMR was able to help us do was to kind of focus on defined areas within the jail that we knew, based on the technical assistance, that were issues that needed to be resolved, and put together kind of a priority list. So what hopefully everyone can see, including the folks in the audience here, is the color coding for the different sections of the jail that are kind of the attention of the priority list. And I'll draw your attention at this point, and we'll get into it here in a minute, to kind of the southwest corner, or the bottom left-hand corner, which is within the older portion of the jail. This was a portion of the jail constructed in the early to mid 1960s, 1963, 64. And it's the highest priority area. So, while there's issues through the entire jail, this is really, probably the oldest, most needy part of the jail in terms of any attention that we're going to be applying. And again, with the limited resources, it was the focus of really the collaborative discussions that happened with the stakeholders, including principally the BSCC and NMR. But what they did in terms of that priority list, this is going to maybe be a little bit easier to understand, is put together a list, not of everything within the jail, but what maybe could be considered kind of a reasonable project for this county to take on. There's been previous conversations that have taken place, that looked at really kind of I think a less focused approach to the work that would be conducted within the jail that, ranged anywhere from $30 to $40 million without ever having a real high standard applied in terms of the analysis and the cost estimation. This was put together by some really qualified subcontractors of NMR who just do opinions of probable cost. And again, with the conversations happening between NMR and the BSCC on where those efforts should be prioritized, the project as a whole is inclusive of the pieces that are stated here, which again, the highest priority area being that portion that I kind of focused your attention on the southwest corner, which is the pods A through C. That's the highest priority on the list that was developed. The mental health office area, which is immediately to the east of pods A through C. Recreation yard modifications, which are lower priority, but they're also lower cost efforts. Intake configuration, the visitation area, and then the nurse and exam area. And so if you look at those individual pieces, the cost for what we've kind of defined as kind of what the project realistically could be considered to be is about $9.2 million. And this is kind of a focused map showing those specific areas, not including all the other areas that are part of the broader project or broader need. So what we're doing, when you talk about construction projects, in a lot of cases, you have to do things like construction phasing because, difficulties with a construction schedule or proper, subcontractors or just different phases of the project entirely. We're not really characterizing this project as a construction phasing approach, but we are looking at it from a budget phasing approach. The budget phasing is really necessary, again, because we have this $3.1 million through the federal appropriation that we have available, which we could lose, but we have available. But we know that we have this, basically $9.2 million project kind of conceived of that's going to hopefully address those biggest crucial priorities. So the phasing approach, really leads us to what can we do within the broader project to use the 3.1 and not lose it. Because the way the federal appropriations work is if the funding isn't obligated within a pretty narrow window of time, you lose it. So we needed to put together a project that can be considered feasible to the funding agency, the USDA, in order to not lose the money. So while the project as a whole is hopefully going to be inclusive of all those different pieces that we just kind of looked at in terms of the funding piece of it, to be able to get this application sent off to the USDA and to have this funding obligated, we had to come up with something that could be feasible. So if nothing else materialized in the way of funding so that we could do the remaining pieces, we could at least do this. So again, the architects that we've been consulting with have that opinion of probable cost put together. That's going to be, what we probably just refer to for simplicity's sake as phase one of the project. But again, that's not a construction phasing term. That's a funding phasing approach. As part of the application, we've included a preliminary architectural report. This was presented to the board in July with the authorization request for the resolution to be able to submit the application. The preliminary architectural report provides, I think, a lot more specificity in terms of what actually would be happening within the area that we're focusing on. And you can see it's going to be pretty consistent with the issues that I think this board and the public probably even is aware of in terms of, what those issues may be. Things like flooring, things like windows. Pods A through C would actually be kind of reorganized in terms of its layout of space, really at the prompting of the BSCC representative, who said, really the way you guys are holding your inmates here is really kind of an antiquated way to do it. What we need to be doing is moving forward with something that we've, the industry kind of considers to be a little more of a standard approach with the dormitory layout and the day rooms, but obviously taking care of those, maintenance issues that are long overdue, the flooring and the bars and, all the pieces that are pretty well broken down, I think, in the PAR. And I'm certainly available to talk about any of those details if the board's interested to do that. But again, this is federal funding. Part of the reason why it's taken, the time that it has since the funding was announced was some of the things we talked about last month with the grant authorization. We have to deal with NEPA. We have to deal with the age of the jail under the National Historic Preservation Act because it's old. It's kind of ironic. It's maintenance issues that are generated because it is so old. Well, we also have to look at whether it qualifies as a historic property under the federal guidelines. So it all just takes time. So we've remained in communication with BSCC as we've put these pieces together. They're supportive of this approach. That they think it's obviously, anything that we'd be doing, frankly, would be good, I think, in their minds. But again, I think they really do appreciate that we were inclusive in our approach and involved a bunch of different stakeholders and really focused on what they perceive to be those highest priority issues. So, as I noted, there is a deadline approaching. It's a pretty tight window from the time the fiscal year 22 authorization was announced. The agency has until September 30th to obligate this funding. So we were able to get the application off to the USDA in the latter part of July. It's currently under review. And as a piece of the application process, we need, after the application was submitted under the USDA program rules, we needed to have this public hearing. So I think the public hearing, serves an important function just in letting the public know, what the approach is going to be, how we're going to be using this funding and the effort that we're going to be putting into the jail. But it's also a requirement of the grant program. So next steps would really, it's a bit of a variable in terms of, what that looks like, but we do have at least an idea of what we need to do. As I alluded to, and as you saw in the diagram, obviously the jail includes a lot of different areas that we're not going to be able to touch really with this funding and really the funding that we've identified as part of this project per se. So we know, the pieces that we included, the 9.2, there's going to be areas outside of that, principally on the newer side that are going to fall outside of that. But really, how do we make up the gap from the 9.2 with the 3.1 to the 9.2 to get into those other areas? Well, now that we've hopefully gotten through this phase of the project, we can really shift our energy and our focus on, having conversations with other potential funders on making up that $6 million difference. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversations that I know you all have had with Senator McGuire, with Assemblymember Wood, with Congressman Huffman. We're all, I think, collectively working towards the same idea, but now I think we have a more clear strategy for how we get there. One of the big pieces that whenever you have those conversations with your elected officials and with different agencies that could do funding is what exactly do you need? And I don't think anybody was in a position to really say until we started to do this work. Again, we had a vague notion that there were issues in the jail that existed, but what are they and how do you approach them? How do you put a dollar figure on that until you apply some analysis? So that's what we've been doing, and those will be the next steps. Hopefully we can get this funding formally obligated in the next month or so. Once we have that, again, and again, I think the conversations are already happening, but I think our energy will just shift into another gear, once we get through this initial phase of the project. And as I indicated, at least, now if nothing else were to materialize, we can secure this funding and at least do some really important work in the jail. But our goal is definitely to do as much as we can. So again, the phase one element of the project is going to be those areas that I previously identified. This diagram just applies a little bit of cost in terms of the opinion that was received from the cost estimator to some of these other areas. Doesn't even include some of the other areas that we would probably need to get into as well. But as we've defined the project in terms of what would be, again, reasonable, something that's not going to, go over $10 million through whatever funding may be likely. Again, really fleshing out the details of these other pieces so we can have those specific conversations with the BSCC, with the state, with our elected representatives on what could be provided. I've said strategy a couple different times. I think it's really important here whenever you have a project that involves really a lot of different kind of complicated pieces. But the goal, obviously, is going to be to achieve compliance with the ADA requirements, with the BSCC requirements to improve staff and inmate safety, improve jail functionality, and I think from the community perspective, extend the economic life of this asset that we have. It needs work, but I think with the right strategy and with the right effort, we can really do a lot of good things. So this flow chart, kind of just, I think, puts that strategy to kind of a visual representation of how we need to be approaching this. Where we're at, we're kind of following the track on the left side that's in the yellow blocks, where we have this phase 1 project put together. We've obtained preliminary architectural information from the architects that we're working with. We are in the process of finalizing the NEPA and the National Historic Preservation Act requirements. That's again part of all the federal, funding requirements for every federal agency. And so we're really kind of that block on the bottom left, one up that says obtain award. The blue path in the middle is going to be for the stuff, the items that we really can't pick up with this federal funding, where hopefully we can, I think the most likely scenario is obtain either state funding or do some sort of internal, financing or something along those lines, where the requirements are going to look a little bit different, but they're going to play out in kind of a similar way. Instead of dealing with the NEPA issues, it'll be the CEQA issues, for example, between the two tracks. And then the third kind of column over there on the right, which is kind of, I guess, red, that's going to be items that really fall outside of what we would classify as a project activity. Things like just maintenance, deferred maintenance that needs to get dealt with. It's a tough environment to work in. And I think for a lot of reasons, maintenance has been a challenge. But again, if you put those three kind of pieces together, the three tracks together, again, the goal is to end up with a product that achieves the goals that we've kind of identified here. So, for the purposes, I think, of this presentation, which was really kind of focused on the project that we've defined it, I don't really feel the need to get into the future work too much. It is needed. I mean, it is necessary. It is real. But really what we're trying to do is kind of keep our focus on what we've defined as this project, kind of in coordination with the BSCC, the jail operators, the sheriff's office, our architects as kind of our qualified experts that are lending us consultation, not lending, providing consultation. But there is future work. And I think we can do the two things concomitantly. I think we can work on this project and be aware of those other issues that do need to be dealt with and figure out a strategy for how to do that too. But just wanted to make it, put it up there for the public and the board's awareness that, while we are focused on these immediate efforts, we're not going to lose focus of the big picture and certainly aware of, those other items that need to be dealt with as well. So that is the presentation, kind of in a bit of a nutshell. I'm certainly available if there's any questions on any of the specifics of this. If the public has any questions or comments after you open the public comment period, I'll remain available too. But that is what I have for you today.
Very good, Randy. Thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor Wilson, I'll give you first crack at this, being it's your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, and this is, I'm glad to see this. All I can say is when I walked through that jail the first time, to see the condition that it had deteriorated to over the period of 8 years, basically, I was shocked, and it really was very impactful to see how little maintenance had been maintained and kept up over the years, and how it had been allowed to degrade down to what it was at. My only concern in looking at the plan going forward is I have some priorities that would probably be different than where they're looking right now. You know, I would be looking more at the intake area, especially for sobering cell, which is absolutely, you know, needed. But the lack of security, the lack of maintenance on the doors primarily that are unsecure and are, I mean, they were a joke, unfortunately. You know, they put a hasp block that you'd have on your gate to secure your booking doors, and that's just, it just floored me when I saw that. I couldn't believe that had been considered to be somehow secure or safe in anybody's realm, especially not in the jail. But you know, that those would be a priority above cells that are no longer housing inmates and are no longer being used to house inmates. Because some of those pods, 2 of the pods are not being used right now for inmate housing. They're utilized by medical staff for intake and interviews and other processes that they're doing, but they're not actually housing inmates. And our focus should be on that intake area, which is used every single day, and security is of utmost importance, and ability to be able to adequately staff, hold, and move. Because those intake areas, they often become our, when inmates are sick or they're problematic, coming down from drugs, alcohol, whatever, and we have to monitor them constantly. We move them into those intake areas. And so they're constantly being utilized, they're constantly being used, and that their security is of utmost importance. And the condition that they're currently in, at least last I walked through there, is not safe or secure or, you know, usable for what we purpose them for. And the conditions of a sobering cell, the requirements now, we don't have that adequately at all. Let alone another holding cell for mental health issues, which is something different, but is also needed in that facility because we don't have one. Those would be my priorities. If I have dollars to spend, I'm gonna spend it on locations that we use every single day, all the time, that are heavily needed for that security level to be at its top. Anyway.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Supervisor Starkey.
So, a couple questions. You know, real estate, you know, Dave Powell's here, but they talk about the bones. Are the bones of that facility good?
Thank you for asking. Yes. That was one of the, I think, the things that there was some, there was some general ideas around whether it was or wasn't. And thankfully, as part of this process, we've been able to apply a little more critical analysis to that very question. There was ground penetrating radar analysis done of the rebar within the concrete walls that determined the rebar looks great. The pictures of it look fantastic. So yes, the bones are good.
Yeah, because I'm about to say that $3.1 million lipstick to put on a pig is not a good idea. However, if the bones are good, and this is going to be the location of our jail, this is what we are going to invest in, then I'm all for that. I just wanted to make sure. The second thing, and I'm hearing what Supervisor Wilson is saying, and I agree with that. I'll put on my old probation officer hat that rehabilitation is very important. At some point, and I'm agreeing with what your team has identified as being the priorities. So with that said, for phase 2, what I'd like to have in consideration is there's so many new requirements coming down with regard to CalAIM is the new Medi-Cal, and the requirements that are, as of March of 2024. I want to make sure that there is space within that facility to administer those services that are being mandated to do. It might be that the Sheriff's Department has outgrown sharing this facility with the jail. So we may need to look at alternates for where we can actually have our Sheriff's Department administration, the coroner, that sort of thing. Just to kind of keep that in mind, that we may have completely outgrown that facility to house all of the requirements that are going to be mandated for jail and the inmates, and behavioral health getting in there to do that, as well as operate a whole department. So if you could just kind of keep that in mind, that there are new requirements coming down and that they're going to need space in order to deliver those services.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey. Okay, I guess at this time we will open this up for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item?
Yeah, here I am again. I see that in this county, since I've lived here for nearly 50 years, a whole parade of edifices that this and other boards have funded over the years. And first of all, I do not dispute the fact that the jail needs some help. There's not much question of that. But beyond that, it seems like the county is negligent in a lot of respects, that they build these edifices in a lot of cases with funding that ultimately comes out of the pockets of the taxpayer. But yet those edifices that we create here in this county aren't being protected in the way of deferred maintenance. And it seems like it's a continual tale of woe that just about every government project that's occurred in this community for the last, at least 50 years, in some cases more like 80 years, come to the point where they literally are falling apart around our ears, and there's no way of addressing that issue without literally rebuilding those kinds of edifices from scratch. And as Supervisor Starkey pointed out, do we want to spend a ton of money on a jail that likely will not suit the current uses that this community demands of it, that has the Sheriff's Department outgrown that particular facility? And are we wise spending more money to try to, as Supervisor Starkey colorfully described it, putting lipstick on a pig and hoping that it'll survive for, who knows how long before it begins to deteriorate and fall apart again? I ask that you consider this when you're going forward with this. I mean, $3 million, of course, is an awful lot of money to turn your nose up at, but clearly the requirement is for 3 times that amount, just to put lipstick on the pig, so to speak. And I would hope that after the fiascos I've seen for the last 6 months of deferred maintenance creating huge problems for this community, that this board would start to consider that when they're going forward with these kinds of projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Chairman and Board of Supervisors. I think we see a lot of examples of federal, state, and local dollars and resources being wasted. As the state defers its responsibilities back on counties, the policies that the state is mandating is resulting in our streets and our neighborhoods being less safe. A good example of wasted resources are all the empty beds at our local adult detention center. It's currently at its lowest population since it opened. I'm just wondering if the county has even considered joining with the state in a JPA to house some of our county jail residents at the state facility with available beds. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, I will close the public comment period on this item, and we will move on to item number 15. It's our 10:40 timed item. Run a little bit late, Jake and Cheyenne. Our Department of Health and Human Services Behavioral Health Branch. presentation. Thank you guys for being here.
Good morning again, Board. So we're really excited to present to you a presentation about behavioral health branch. As I mentioned at a previous meeting, DHHS, as you know, does so much. And so we've committed to bringing back branch reports about on a quarterly basis. So now we have our behavioral health branch managers here to present some details about their programs, what's on the horizon, some mandates that we have, and just some statistical information to help explain what we do. So I'd like to introduce Cheyenne Hogred and Michael Coates. You may be wondering why Michael's presenting again. He has recently transitioned over to the Housing Services Manager position. So he went from public assistance and is now in behavioral health. So welcome.
And unfortunately, Jen Coates, our other program manager, couldn't be here this morning, so I'll present some on her info and hopefully do it justice. Just to dive into some of our programs under behavioral health. One is our substance use disorder program. Lovely picture here of my great staff who run this program. They provide a variety of programs from adult outpatient services, women's treatment, youth services, etc. here. Our substance use disorder program definitely saw a decline during the COVID pandemic, and part of that was due to some regulations from the state that didn't allow them to do non-in-person services. So we saw a dip, but we see it's definitely rising back up, and they served about 283 unique clients last year. Most of our referrals come from the probation department as well as child welfare services, and we definitely do get some self-referral people too. Our substance use disorder program is funded through a few different funding streams as listed here on this slide. I do want to highlight the IGT funding on this. Without that funding, the only people who could go to residential treatment would be perinatal women. So women who are pregnant and or 60 days postpartum with a substance use disorder. So that IGT fund allows us to serve anybody else into going to residential who needs that need. The mandates of our program are to provide treatment services, prevention services, ODF, which is outpatient drug-free services, IOT, which is our intensive outpatient program, the perinatal residential, NTP, which is narcotic treatment program. Before you today was on the consent agenda our agreement with Aegis Treatment, and that's what we use to facilitate that mandate. We do have a mandate to have a medical director. We have a contract with Dr. Stutz to provide that service to our office. He reviews every chart that comes into our office to make sure that the person meets medical necessity, signs off on documentation, allowing them into treatment. And then we are required to have a DUI program. We have HASP DUI to do that we have a contract with the local agency. On the horizon for SUD is that we've been going through all the CalAIM reform things, and we're continuing down that path. One thing that I learned recently is that the state is looking at bringing SUD certification as a required item. This used to be a voluntary item in which our office voluntarily surrendered our certification when we became drug Medi-Cal certified, because that was kind of a higher level. So the state is now looking at in January 2024 that that's going to be a new mandated thing for us to do. MHSA modernization, which I will talk about in a later slide, definitely does affect our SUD staff. Our mobile crisis unit, also I'll speak more in depth about later. Really I see their role in being on mobile crisis, that we are required to do Narcan distribution, things like that, so they'll be instrumental in that piece. A major thing to highlight is Department of Healthcare Services is looking at doing an administrative integration, meaning merging mental health and drug and alcohol together. Much of our regulations live separately, our audits live separately, but here in Del Norte, we're one agency with the same oversight, the same administrative staff. So I see this as a very good thing for us. Hopefully for our admin team, it will help us streamline some things, especially since we don't have as many staff as a large county. And with that, we have asked the state to opt in early to that. And so our hope is that we'll be live before the 2025 timeframe. Mental health mandates, some of our staff that help us keep that going, here pictured. We are required to have a patient rights advocate. We have a contract with Smith Waters Group to do that. We are required to have a 24-hour access line. That serves as both a crisis line, an access line, a grievance line. It does a few different capacities. And we have our contract with Crisis Support Services out of Alameda County to do that. We are required to have our local behavioral health board, some specific plans that we have to write on an annual basis that you can read through those plans on our website on behavioral health on the county's website. We are required to have the contracted facilities for both acute and long-term placements. Oftentimes, many of those contracts come before the board, and we have an array of facilities that we use to place people into those facilities when we need to. AB 2275 hearings is something that began in January of this year. This requires us to, anytime we write a secondary 5150 hold for somebody in Sutter Coast Hospital, meaning that we haven't found placement within the 72 hours, we are required to have a hearing with a hearing officer and a patient rights advocate present. So that was a new contract we had to get this year, and it also increased our cost of our patient rights advocate because they need to be present at all those hearings. Network adequacy, I kind of just put in here as a big highlight. We are audited to this to make sure that we're providing timely access, that we have the capacity to serve the community, et cetera. Our Mental Health Services Center, they're funded under the MHSA funds. They provide group services, full service partnership programming, peer support specialists, and while I know they look like an amazing hairdressing crew, they actually are great mental health staff. Service Center, they have seen a kind of decline in clients over there, and I think that a lot of that was the pandemic, that we weren't able to do group services. You know, there was limited capacities, and we definitely saw a steady decline. What we're doing right now is adding some new groups, some new services, some staff changes around, and Jen Coates is working with that team to really kind of bring that back up to what it used to be. Our same-day team, they operate and cover our crisis services. So day-to-day, they're out there doing 5150 evaluations, crisis interventions. They perform all the screening assessments that are mandated by the state that we conduct, and they do all the follow-up services after crisis. Same-day services is funded through a few different funding streams listed here. Mandates really are that we provide crisis services and that we provide those access screening 5150 evaluations. There's some data here just so you can look and see how many unique service counts we have and also unduplicated clients served. That white line that just shoots up huge is that the state mandated that we do those access screenings. And so we had kind of opted in to start doing it even though it wasn't a mandate, and we were kind of getting them done. Now that it's a mandate, like everyone's coming in is getting that done. Psychiatric placements, so this is just to kind of look at the annual cost of what it takes to house people under short-term placement and long-term placement. And as you can see, the short-term is actually going down, which is great. We think that, you know, it kind of ironically, our same-day team and stuff started where you kind of see that going down. So hopefully they're doing great efforts to reduce hospitalization needs. Long-term shot up huge, and that really is a result of one individual who was in the jail and was found incompetent to stay on trial, was sent to Napa State Hospital, could not be restored to competency. He required a very high level of placement, something that was a new contract for us, and ranged from $30,000 to $60,000 a month to house him in these facilities. He's since stepped down in programming and is a little less costly, so hopefully we'll start to see that dip back off as he improves. The PATH is our new mobile crisis that we'll be launching in July of next year. It's a mandated benefit that we must provide 24-hour, 7 days a week crisis services. Our expectation is that we would need 8 additional staff to run this program. And this picture here is just kind of a rendering of what we're looking like that van might look like inside. So people can actually come inside, have an appointment or a session with our staff anywhere within the community, their home, et cetera. We'll be doing a lot of planning over this next year on rolling this out. There's a lot of great work groups from the state being offered about how to triage calls, how to dispatch calls when they come into 911, et cetera. So we'll be following that closely. Telepsychiatry, we've had a long-established relationship with Kingsview. They do our telehealth. We began with them in 2009. They see adolescent and adults, about 370 plus unique clients per year, funded through a few different funding streams. In this photo is our ARCH team who helps support them, and pictures of our doctors that we utilize. Prevention and early intervention programs. Great staff at Coastal Connection. They do a lot of different programming, really targeting stigma reduction, early signs of mental health, suicide prevention programs. We also have sub-agreements out with community-based organizations such as the Boys and Girls Club, the Rec Department, Family Resource, who provide similar types of services to our community. So the big thing I really think that you guys should take note of is the MHSA modernization. This is Governor Newsom's proposal to modernize MHSA funding. This is an initiative that would go on the ballot in 2024. we have looked at this internally and kind of highlighted some things, but I'm going to read off a piece too, is that based on fiscal modeling and analysis as drafted, SB 326 would have unintentional results of dramatically reducing the level of funding currently being spent on core mental health services. This would directly affect our local outpatient crisis services and recovery services. This would drive worse outcomes for our most vulnerable population that behavioral health serves. It would also eliminate our capital improvement technology funds, our innovation funds, and our workforce investment funds, as well as reduce our prudent reserves. MHSA is a hugely volatile funding, probably 3 times more volatile than state general fund. What we've looked at internally is that our prevention programs would almost virtually be eliminated. I can't even imagine that we'd be able to fund some of those programs anymore at all. Also, I think a thing to highlight is our community services system, so our service center, our same-day program, all of those things. We right now spend about 76% of our funding onto those programs, and this would reduce us down to 30% of the overarching funding, of which 50% has to go for early intervention, so a massive cut to those services. We're following this closely. We're meeting with advocacy groups around it. It definitely has a lot of new requirements, such as providing substance use disorder treatment without any additional funds to do that. I definitely see this as a very negative thing for us. It also kind of takes the workforce initiative piece out of our hands and lands it with the state. They'll take 3% off the top, and they'll decide how that money is spent. New initiatives for mental health is really the CalAIM payment reform items that we're diligently working through. We did receive a contract or a grant opportunity with the Department of State Hospitals for $500,000. That would be money coming into us to figure out how to keep those with mental illness out of the justice system. Again, the MHSA modernization, our mobile crisis, Care Court, which we're expected to launch in December of 2024, that administrative agreement. And then recently we have been awarded just over $2.6 million for behavioral health bridge housing funding. That will create a kind of new unit within our office focused on housing for our mentally ill clients. Particularly, I see that as a big gear up to what Care Court is going to require of us. And then I'll pass to Mike to do his piece.
Can we comment in between?
Yeah.
Or you want us to wait?
If you want to.
Okay, I just want to briefly say, holy camole, that's a lot of work. And I appreciate you truncating it down into all these slides. I just, not necessarily for you, but to Randy, if you could follow up on that MHSA and make sure our lobbyists are fighting against that. And then maybe in the next couple meetings have a report with regard to that. So, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Michael Coates, Housing Services Manager for County Del Norte. It's great to be in front of you all again. So the housing programs, we are a small but growing team. At this time, we have a housing analyst, we have a caseworker, and we have a peer support worker. And we are all in this, have the same goal to provide the best services we can with what we got. And we're learning what we have in our tool belt at this time as we are a new team. But we have a lot of passion to serve the unhoused people in our community. So with that, some of the housing programs or projects that we got going on. We have the Legacy, which is our home key project, which is hoping to start reconstruction in the next few months, hopefully, so it could, be remodeled. And that will be our permanent supportive housing projects. And at this time, we have 15 units with individuals in it, and post-construction, we'll have all 30 units full with families and individuals. And our team will be case managing those individuals. And then we have our non-congregate emergency shelter program, where we're able to put people into motels who would otherwise not do well out in the streets or in the woods. So we're able to bring them into a hotel room, provide them services, help them get connected to resources in our community, and help them find permanent housing. We also have our rapid rehousing program. If somebody who is in our HMIS system is able to fill out an application and get an offer on an apartment, we're able to help with the down payment, first month's rent, and make that transition a little bit easier for them. And then we have our homeless management information system, We do intakes into this system, and this is where we could track our unhoused individuals and see what services they're already accessing that they haven't accessed. Different programs that we have for housing has project codes, so we could tie them into that project and just be able to follow those individuals better. And then we have our point in time. This is a neat project for us. I participated as a worker. Now I get to be one of the individuals that leads this project. We're looking forward to it. If you look back from 2019 to 2023, we've seen a significant rise in our numbers. And I think two things feed into that, me personally. I think, one, we see more people coming to our community as transients, whatnot, so that number will grow. But also, I think we're getting better as a team, as a PIT team. You know, we've grown as far as our partners and who's doing the work, and we learned how to get out into the woods and other places where we might have missed previous years. So I think those two things are fitting into those numbers. So I think there's always been a high number. I think we're just getting better at reaching them. And if we see a little dip in 2021, that was during the pandemic, and at that time we were only able to count the sheltered individuals. Okay, our positions, our programs, and our projects, they're all funded through grants, and we have a few of them listed up here. We have the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Grant, HHAP, and then Housing and Homeless Incentive Program, HHIP, and then SERI, and HomeKey, and there's quite a few of them. And so with that, our analysts are tracking what those grants are and make sure that we're working within those grants and when do we got to report out on them. And so they're staying very busy. And outside of our team, we have a huge amount of supports of individuals that are helping us track those grants as well. We're part of a 7-county local COC, Continuum of Care, and we meet regularly with them to find out where we're at with our grants and make sure we're doing the work correctly. So what to watch out for? Well, definitely the reconstruction of the legacy and turn that project into what it's going to become, permanent supportive housing for those individuals that are there. It's going to be a great project. Can't wait to see it get completed. And then to watch for is for us to get better at our jobs. We're going to be looking out to other counties, seeing what's working for them, and go and meet them, go visit some of their sites and see what's working, what's not working, what we could bring to our county to do a better job. And with that, I will pass it back on to Cheyenne.
Thank you, Mike.
So Jen Coates oversees the Office of the Public Guardian. They're mandated by the state, or we're mandated by the state to have a public guardian's office, conservatorship office. It's an unfunded mandate. This program is really paid using DHHS funding and no general funding. Their responsibilities are to care for the financial management, care, health care, et cetera, for those residents in Del Norte County who are severely disabled and unable to manage on their own. One thing currently that their office is dealing with is some individuals that they had conservatorship over who had assets. This team might be required to marshal assets, including homes, et cetera. And so right now they have 5 properties that they're preparing and getting ready to list for sale. They have several clients that they work with, and I'll explain the types of conservatorships really quick. So LPS is a conservatorship that really is mental health focused, probate conservatorship, limited conservatorship, which is really around intellectual developmental type of disorders, and Murphy conservatorships, which are criminal, which aren't often done here in our community. LPS conservatorships are referred to our office, usually from an acute psychiatric hospital and the Superior Court. Currently, we have about 33 cases. 23 of our clients are in those long-term or short-term placements. Probate conservatorships can come in a couple different ways, usually from skilled nursing, hospitals, APS, or the court, and currently we have 9 cases of those. One thing that Jen wanted to bring to attention is SB 43, which would change what some of the definition is around gravely disabled and potentially cause an increase in conservatorships, and so we're monitoring and following that. And also Care Court could pose an increase to their caseload as well, so just following that. MHSA modernization, they are significantly dependent on some of the services that then behavioral health offers for treatment for their clients. And so if some of that funding dips, it could have mass impacts to the clients that they serve. In-home IHSS Public Authority. They manage the enrollment of IHSS care providers within the community, doing background checks, employment, payroll, all of those things. They're a team of one great lady that manages this. We are mandated to have this program, again, by the state. They're a record of employer. Just to kind of some things to look for in their office is they have collective bargaining processes that they go through. Those collective bargaining processes could have impacts to realignments if we're not negotiating in good faith, et cetera. You could see on here caseload counts of providers and recipients. And then also, I think the thing to highlight is the wage aspect, that Del Norte County actually pays a little bit higher than small county average, state average to those care providers providing that service. And that is it. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Thank you, Cheyenne and Mike, for being here. Is there any other questions for this group?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say this is just one department of DHHS, correct?
Yes.
All right, so this is just the behavioral health department.
Correct.
I mean, this is a lot. So I just really want to make sure that people know how much you guys are doing. I appreciate all the services that you're providing. I loved this presentation. I'd like the copies of the slides if I could.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I just have one question. On the legacy, when's that projected to be completed, the remodel?
I know we're hoping for a start in September, October. As far as the completion, I'm not sure. I could get back to you on that.
Okay.
Renell's running up here. I think she
Hi,
might have
yeah, I'll just
something.
fill in a little bit more. It's actually anticipated to be completed in about a 6-month time period. So depending on when it gets started, the contractor is very familiar with the resources that are available, our weather, so has not guaranteed, because that's difficult to do in construction, but really is positive about moving that project through quickly. So we're really excited about that.
Moving it with just the 15 or all 30?
All 30. Completion of all 30. So it's really, originally we were going to do it in 4 phases. We have been not filling rooms due to preparation of the construction. Of course, it's taken a little bit longer than we anticipated. So that's why we have half the rooms filled, and we hope to do it just in 2 phases so that we don't have to relocate the individuals significantly. We'll finish a group of rooms, move them to those completed rooms, and then finish the last. We do have a few that have some mobility issues and there is not an elevator, so we may need to relocate them to like another motel temporarily until that's completed. And then we'll definitely provide an update as to when the status of that is, and if you'd like to see a tour of the rooms and the renovation, just let us know.
Very good. Okay. Is there any public comment on this presentation?
I guess at this point, we've had 2 reports from 2 different segments of Health and Human Services. In both cases, what is curious to me is there have been a massive increase in the number of employees at Health and Human Services, and it seems like the numbers are over 200, and the county expends 60% of their budget on Health and Human Services activities. And I'm a little curious as to why there's the need for constant new employees, constant new programs, constant attention to different kinds of human issues that don't seem to be going away, that with all of this massive interest in Health and Human Services, we don't seem to be producing many in the way of people returning to being functional human beings in the community. So I'm wondering if government involving themselves in all of the various issues that people have is actually becoming productive, because ordinarily when you see an increase in the number of employees, an increase in the number of activities, that generally is a positive thing for most businesses. But in this particular case, it seems like there's no positive outcome in a lot of respects. We are spending more and more money to address more and more issues, and we don't seem to be having a great deal of success resolving many of those issues. In particular, it seems like we spend enormous amounts of money on a rather minuscule portion of the county's population, and we don't seem to be getting the bang for our buck, so to speak. It seemed like that those of us that apparently don't have issues pay but don't necessarily receive the kinds of services that we're currently hearing about from Health and Human Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Any other public comment? Okay. Moving on down our agenda.
My only concern in going forward is that there is legislation that the governor is trying to push forward that would allow placement of homeless into hotel rooms that are vacant, with or without the permission of the hotel. And that would be devastating to a lot of the local hotels who do not want those placements done in their occupancy. But the legislation that is being proposed anyway at this point in time does not give the hotel an option. If they have vacant rooms, they have to take these. And so that needs to be pushed back against, because that's not a good practice or process to force private businesses to do something that they choose not to do.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Thank you for your presentation again, Cheyenne and Michael. Item 16 is a long one. We're going to, there is 6 steps here to take. We are going to take the following actions related to the reorganization of the probation department, resulting in the closure of Juvenile Hall as a youth detention facility and establishment of a reentry unit and related organizational changes. 1, we're going to approve and adopt the classification description of the reentry officers 1, 2, and 3. Establish 4 position allocations of reentry officers 1, 2, and 3 to be effective upon future determined date. We're going to approve and adopt the revised classification description for the program coordinator 1 and 2. Authorize 1 new program coordinator 1 and 2 position allocation, and authorize 1 new supervising deputy probation officer position allocation in the probation department. Also approve and adopt the revised classification description for the assistant chief probation officer and the wage adjustment to retain department structure through the reorganization. 5 is approve and adopt the classification description for the probation services manager 1 and 2 and elimination of the staff services manager. And 6, direct human resources to update the appropriate salary schedules and county staffing chart as necessary, as requested by the chief probation officer and county administrative officer. And that's what we have to consider on this item. Good morning, Chief Raymond.
Good morning. That's a mouthful. Thank you. You have my report. I'll just go over some high-level notes just to coalesce the focus around this. So this is the culmination of quite a bit of work by numerous people, and I'm not going to take credit for that. My staff put in a ton of work to come up with what we believe is a good solution for the reentry unit. As difficult as it is to close the juvenile hall, we think that we can do some good things in going a different direction and focusing on programs with this team. And so a large chunk of this is the stand-up of that team. Couldn't have done this without the help of administration and the budget team, as well as the union and the folks involved in the union that jumped into the conversation from probation department staff as well. So I appreciate the time and your consideration in this. What it boils down to for the reentry team is it centers around 4 reentry officers. That job description is included in the packet. Primary focuses are care and custody of youth that are arrested and need transportation, both to custody and then back and forth to court, as well as we go through that hearing and disposition process for youth that are charged with crimes. That kind of centers on the peace officer aspect of what their duties are. A significant portion of time that they're going to spend is going to be in facilitating and working in programs with those kids and their families. Families are involved. We aren't, don't misunderstand, we're not providing programs to the families necessarily. Our focus is on the kids. But we are and have been for quite some time doing parenting programs, things like that as well, and trying to incorporate some of those aspects. So the ROs are going to help facilitate directly some of those programs, as well as be staff on site at the youth center to be able to facilitate other program providers as they come through the facility, make sure kids get where they need to go. Those program providers have what they need in the building and in the facility to take care of those programs. One program coordinator, we've had a program coordinator position for a long time, Tammy Sweeney. She has actually managed both juvenile and adult programs, both facilitating directly as well as helping coordinate some of the other services. With the stand-up of the reentry team, we have a need for a dedicated program coordinator, both for juvenile services and the adult services. And lastly, the supervisor of the team will be a DPO, supervising DPO. And they'll work in conjunction with juvenile services and the POs that are doing case management and working those caseloads that we have of youth on supervision as well. The effective date is going to be in. I asked you not to give an effective date. We want to go through that process with existing staff right now to, once these are established, to get them necessary paperwork so that we can work through a transfer process. They can make those decisions on where they want to be and what they want to do. And so that effective date will be determined by you and coincide with the closure of the juvenile hall division as well. But the establishment of those positions allows us to go through that process with staff. I'll check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. So that's the reentry team. Along with that, I have to give credit to the administrative team, because when we brought them the reentry unit, CAO Lopez basically said, well, take this opportunity to look at where your department is at with the salary structure. We have compaction issues. We have competitive salary issues in comparison with other counties. And so we went back and retooled that, and with their help, I think we came up with something that is viable, that actually makes us more competitive on the probation officer side, as well as puts the ROs in a good position. At the end of the day, we're able to deal with some of those competitive salary issues as well as the compaction issues. So this transition allows us that opportunity to take care of some of those things, including dealing with the program coordinator. That was just a single step position, and so we can create a 1-2 out of this, as well as the probation services manager. It's a staff services manager position, but really in our department, that position covers a lot of different aspects, and so we rewrote it to some degree, and also that was a single level. We're changing that to a 1-2. And then adjusting the assistant chief's salary as well in order to deal with some of those compaction issues. Again, could not have put this together without a lot of help from a lot of different people. So that's really what I have, and I'm available to answer questions.
Very good. Do we have any questions from the board? No? Joey? Supervisor Starkey, go
Yeah,
right
my
ahead.
only question is that the supervising probation officer position, we're adding another position, but you want it just for the youth center.
Yeah, that'll be the supervisor of the reentry team, focused on the operation of the Youth Opportunity Center and care and custody of the kids.
Okay. And I'm just trying to visualize how that works. So if a kid's on probation and they want to go to the youth center, well, I mean, because there's only like 40 kids on probation at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably closer to 30, mid-30s. Yeah, and so our kids that, as part of their case plans is for probation, they're already receiving those services. Those will be offered in the youth center. And so that'll be in conjunction with the reentry team, facilitated by the ROs. It's very possible POs will help backfill when needed as well, doing some of those programs.
Yeah, I just think that we should pay close attention. This is fine for now, but we should really this should be a living kind of document. And as we move on, because it's new, we should see if that might be a redundant position.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely fair.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Wilson, do you have anything?
Yeah, I want to thank you, everyone that's had a participation in this. putting this together. It's been a long slog and not something that anybody really wanted to do to begin with. So I appreciate all the effort and hard work to bring this together. And hopefully with the reorg and pay scale adjustments, we can see some growth and filling some of these positions as we go forward. I'm glad we took the opportunity to look at that. Thank the administration for doing that and bringing it forward, because it was needed, and hopefully it'll help as we seek to fill those positions that are key to making this a success.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson.
I'm sorry, just one more question. So it is currently stands, so if we have employees that are currently JCOs, they will be first up, they will be positioned to be reentry officers?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be a transfer. I don't know, because not being in HR, I know the process from the outside. In a sense, this happened with Barrow. When Barrow closed, we had vacant positions in juvenile hall, and the YGCs, essentially it was a different name for JCOs. So literally it was a transfer. I don't know if it's one piece of paper or a packet they get from HR, and if they want that position, they'll fill that out and be transferred
Yeah,
into
and that should help with your morale a
I
little.
think it's actually with our side letter agreement that's our.
Yeah, no, I read it too. I just wanted to hear it out loud. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Again. Okay, yes, thank you, Chief. We'll open this up for public comment at this time. You don't get any more questions.
No, I'm not. I was going to
Thank you.
So here we go again. We're forming a new department, and we're staffing it with people. And, you know, I don't have a problem with the fact that you're trying to integrate people that currently work at juvenile hall into these positions. That's admirable. But at the same time, it seems like you've also used it as a mechanism to give a certain segment of the public employees another raise in this current 12-month period. So I'm kind of wondering how you can justify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this? Good morning, Norma.
Good morning. Norma Williams, Chapter President, Delaware County Employees Association, SEIU 10-1. This was a long slog, as was defined. That is true. Grateful that we're here. I have kudos to our subject matter experts, the 2 JCOs that participated in the talks with the county and with the chief. In regards to what this all constitutes, especially in response to this gentleman, they earned it. They deserve it. I think every county employee does. This is not, in effect, a new department, but it's basically a transition to something hopefully better. And in a part of the community who, and quite frankly, I don't think any of us would deem minuscule. The youth of our community is our future. And if there's an opportunity to rehabilitate them, that's what we are supposed to do. That is part of the overall mission. It's the part of the mission of the probation department and of every single employee that works in that department. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Yeah.
I would like to move to approve items 1 through 6 in agenda item 16. Is that sufficient?
I'll second that.
We do have a second. Kylie, will you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, item number 17, approve a side letter agreement to clarify the status of the newly created reentry officer classification and other related changes under the terms and conditions of the current memorandum of understanding between the County of Del Norte and SEIU Local 1021. Again, I'd just to echo what Supervisor Starkey says, I'm glad that that our current employees are not going to lose their job and then have to reapply and all that. Good. I'm glad to see that part of this side letter agreement has been agreed to, and I believe it's a good thing. So, thank you for indulging me.
I will
Supervisor
move
Starkey.
to approve.
We have a motion to approve the side letter agreement. Is there a second? We do have a second. Is there any public comment on this item?
It's me again.
Hello.
Hi. When at the last meeting, or at the meeting when this was brought up, I mentioned that the devil's in the details, especially with the side letter agreement. Obviously, there was, and it actually turned out to be for the best. In the end, I would definitely say that both sides were able to actually achieve what they wanted, to get what they wanted with this. For the union, it was obviously making sure that the employees, especially the JCOs, did not have to apply, that they would actually be transferred, or I say reclassified, for what happened back in 2017 with Barrow. In the end, though, and you have to keep in mind, we are still going to be looking at employees that are going to be displaced. I had actually met with 2 of those employees last night, reviewing their options, especially once this goes through, and once it is determined when the actual hall will close as a correctional institution and transition over to a youth center. That is probably the one final little detail that's hanging out there right now, but it's because it does impact those employees who are still waiting to see. However, they are encouraged to continue to avail themselves of what's out there in terms of job openings within county government. They've been encouraged to do so. The union will still continue to assist them and monitor their situation. They've been advised to contact us if there's any issues. And as I said last time, if there's any hiccups in any of this process, the union is definitely open to re-engaging with the county and with probation in order to resolve any of those hiccups. But again, we are pleased with this side letter agreement. And as I said, thank you.
Thank you, Norma. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, I'll close the public
So the only thing I want to say is that you know, it's good for the efforts that we're trying to make to make sure that there is a place for each employee. That's what. But like, we have to make sure that we also let the public know that we can make these positions available. They're not forced to take these positions. If they choose not to go into this new role, that's completely up to them. And there's not a mandation. There's nothing mandated for them to actually accept the positions that are available or the choices that they're given. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Kylie, will you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, I believe this is our last item, item number 18, which is a budget transfer, and that's to approve and adopt transfer number 06-18 in the amount of $81,100 within fiscal year 22-23 from the juvenile hall budget unit to the CYA budget unit to cover the cost of housing awards outside the county as requested by a chief probation officer.
Move to approve.
Got a motion to approve.
I will second.
And we have a second. Is there any public comment on this budget transfer? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Kylie, will you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, that concludes this meeting.
Chair, we have legislative and budget
Oh,
issues.
we do. I'm sorry. I totally missed that. Who are we, what do we have legislated in
You
legislative?
just, if there's anything, you ask the CAO if there's anything pending or if he's aware.
There's no item on it, sorry. Do you have any legislative and budget issues, Mr. Lopez?
I do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any along the board? Okay, seeing none. Now I will adjourn the meeting until our next regular scheduled meeting, August 22nd, 2023. Thank you very much.
And happy birthday.
Oh, yes, happy birthday, Kyle.